The Arizona sun blazed mercilessly over the prairie, the kind of heat that made even the toughest cowhands squint and sweat. Jack Morgan, a weathered cowboy with dust in his beard and grit in his bones, pulled his reins near an abandoned homestead. The wood of the house was great, cracked by years of storms, and the wind whistled through the broken slats like a ghost. Jack was not expecting company, but the West had a way of surprising a man when he least wanted it. From the shadows stepped a young Apache woman. Her steps were slow but steady, her face smeared with dust, her eyes carrying a fire he had only seen in warriors. She looked beaten down by the desert but not broken by it. For a moment, silence stretched between them, the only sound being the restless shift of Jack's horse and the distant cry of a hawk overhead. Her presence was startling, but it was her voice that froze him in his tracks. Trembling yet determined, she raised her hands, palms open in surrender, and said, "Let me stay here, cowboy, a broken bar, and I'll give you what no white woman can." The words cracked through the air like the crack of a whip. Jack's body reacted before his hand slid toward the butt of his revolver. He had fought Apaches before, he had buried friends after raids and had seen blood on both sides, yet this woman carried no weapon. She had nothing but the trembling of her shoulders and the weight of desperation etched into her face. He studied her closely, wondering if this was a trick, a trap, or some cruel test the frontier liked to play on lonely men who thought they had seen it all. Her story tumbled out in fragments, broken but powerful. She spoke of betrayal by her own people, of divisions among her tribe that had left her cast out like dust on the wind. She told of soldiers who had chased her through the desert, guns at her back, treating her as though her life had no worth. Her voice cracked as she admitted she had no place left to go, no home, no tribe, no safety. She stood before him with nothing but her pride and her plea. Jack listened, his jaw tight, his heart pounding like hoofbeats on dry earth. The West had shown him every shade of cruelty, but here, in this woman's eyes, he saw a kind of courage he had not expected. She was not begging for pity, she was begging for survival, and that made her dangerous in a way that stirred something deep inside him. Jack's mind spun with old memories of shootouts in dusty towns, raids under the pale light of the moon, the screams of women and children when fire took the night. He had hated the Apache before, the same way they had hated men like him. But here stood one who was different, who risked her life by stepping into the open before a man who could just as easily put a bullet through her heart. His fingers hovered near his revolver, yet his instincts told him not to draw. There was something in her stance, something in the tilt of her chin and the unflinching way she met his gaze. She was wounded, yes, but not weak. She was alone, yes, but not broken. The desert had burned away all softness, leaving only steel wrapped in human flesh. Jack wondered if this was what she meant by her bold words, that she could offer something no one else could, not comfort or beauty, but the kind of resilience only born from fire. The silence between them grew heavy, filled with more meaning than words could carry. Jack's horse pawed the ground, restless, sensing its master's unease. The wind rattled the old boards of the homestead like dry bones. Jack studied her one last time, every detail carved into his memory of the cracked lips, the steady eyes, the trembling hands that still held themselves high. He realized then that this was no ordinary encounter on the frontier. This was a moment that could change everything. She was not an enemy, not a stranger, not even a danger, though every instinct told him to be cautious. She was a soul, raw and untamed, fighting to survive against a world that seemed bent on swallowing her whole. And for the first time in a long while, Jack Morgan felt something stir in his chest beyond suspicion, beyond hatred, beyond fear. It was the faint, unfamiliar spark of possibility. The night spread across the prairie like a velvet curtain, carrying with it the chill that followed the desert's cruel sun. Jack sat close to the fire, the flames dancing against his weathered face, while the Apache woman, now revealed as Naya, spoke in low, steady rhythm. Her words painted pictures of rivers hidden deep in the canyons, of mountains older than memory, and of her people caught in the storm of survival. Jack listened with the patience of a man used to silence. The crackle of burning wood mixed with the cadence of her voice, creating a rhythm older than the frontier itself. Naya leaned forward, her eyes catching the firelight until they seemed to burn brighter than the sparks that lifted into the sky. "Cowboy," she said, her tone both fierce and pleading. "White women may follow your ways or broken bar, but I know the land. I know its moods, its hungers, its secrets. I can give you a kind of freedom no one else can." Her words hung heavy in the air, sharp enough to cut through the walls Jack had built around his heart. He stared into the fire, his jaw set, but inside, a storm gathered, one he couldn't easily tame. For years Jack had carried the weight of bloodshed. He had fought, lost friends, and lived with mistrust carved deep into his soul. The Apache were his enemies, or so he had always been told. Yet here sat Nia, her voice trembling not from fear but from conviction. She wasn't asking for pity. She was offering something raw, something untamed, something Jack couldn't name. He felt the ghosts of old battles stirring, the faces of men he had buried flashing in the fire's glow. But beyond the scars of war, he saw a woman whose spirit had not been broken, a spirit that seemed to call out to his own loneliness. Nia's hands rested in her lap, fingers curling and uncurling like restless birds. She spoke again, softer this time, almost as though confessing a secret. She told him how she had been cast out, how she had run from both the soldiers who hunted her and the tribe that had abandoned her. She had learned to live with the coyotes, to drink from the hidden springs, to sleep beneath the stars without fear of the night. "You survive with guns," she whispered, "but I survived with the land." Jack's eyes flickered toward her, catching the quiet strength behind her words. For the first time, he saw her not as a stranger, but as a mirror of his own fight to keep living. The fire crackled louder as if to echo the weight of her confession. Jack shifted, pulling his coat tighter, his mind warring with itself. He had known women before, saloon girls with painted faces, ranch widows with soft hands, fleeting company in a hard world. But Nia was none of these. She was something the frontier itself had forged, sharp, resilient, impossible to tame. The thought unsettled him, yet also drew him in. Her offer was not about flesh or comfort, it was about survival, about learning a freedom born from the wilderness. Jack realized that what she promised was not just companionship, but a way to live beyond the fences and grudges of men. The stars glittered above them, thousands of silent witnesses to the fragile bond forming between two enemies turned strangers, and perhaps something more. Jack thought of the frontier itself, how it killed the weak, tested the strong, and yet, sometimes, carved unlikely stories out of the dust. He studied Nia once more. Her eyes no longer looked desperate, they looked determined. She wasn't begging to be taken in, she was daring him to accept what she was. And in that moment, Jack felt the walls he had carried for years begin to tremble, cracked open by nothing more than her courage. The night deepened, coyotes howling in the distance, their cries haunting yet familiar. Jack finally spoke, his voice low and rough, as if pulled from the depths of his chest. "Maybe the land's had its say in us both," he admitted, surprising even himself. The words seemed to loosen something between them. Nia's lips curved into the faintest smile, though her eyes stayed watchful, waiting to see if his resolve would hold. The firelight bathed them in gold and shadow, two figures caught in the vast emptiness of the west, daring to reach for something the world told them was impossible. The silence that followed was different now. It was not the silence of suspicion or mistrust, but of possibility. Jack felt it in his bones as the fragile spark of hope that had not stirred in him for years. He realized Nia's presence was more than chance, more than survival. It was a bridge between two worlds that had spent decades at war. He did not yet know if he could cross it, but for the first time, he wanted to try. As the fire burned lower, Jack nodded slowly, letting the gesture speak what words could not. Nia lowered her gaze, the faintest relief flickering across her face. And under the endless sky, with nothing but stars and silence to witness, two souls found the beginning of something neither had dared to believe possible.